first challenge that we face is the challenge of expectations. And that's a huge challenge for the court. Almost every case comes into the lap, every social issue, every legal issue, and I dare say a large number of political issues fall within the adjudicatory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The reasons for that are numerous. Very often, the government is the largest litigant in the court, and the reason why the government is the largest litigant in the court is for the simple reason that we have, over the last 70 years, bred a culture of indecision. A culture of indecision at the lowest levels of government. So be it a case of a pension, a case of compassionate appointment for a woman who has lost a spouse while in service, who wants a job in a government department, there's always a tendency. There's also a culture of distrust. And that culture of distrust leads many of our top decision makers to be very careful about taking decisions having a bearing on very high stakes. Would there be a vigilance inquiry if the person were to be promoted or were to lay down office? Would there be possibly an allegation that you made a concession to a corporate enterprise and which would be investigated into 10 years down the line? So a variety of reasons in the Indian context have led to a culture of distrust and therefore a culture of indecision on the part of public functionaries. Now, all those cases are therefore deferred to the court. We'd rather have the court decide than us taking a decision. That's one of the reasons why the courts have a large backlog of cases within the fold of cases that we decide. The other reason, apart from the culture of distrust, is possibly more optimistic, which is a culture of faith that there is something which will happen in my favor in the court. Now, we have been dealing with a variety of disputes. As you know, we've dealt with some of them Utkarsh stressed on a short while ago. Should you have the continuance of Section 377 of the Penal Code on our statute books, a colonial era law which made it an offense to have sexual intercourse against carnal intercourse against the order of nature, which basically reached out against the LGBTQI community. Should privacy be a fundamental right? So that came to the court. Is the right to a clean environment a fundamental right? Should women be in the armed forces? For instance, when we were dealing with the Armed Forces Permanent Commission issue, the Navy told us that, well, there's one critical reason why we can't have women in the Navy, which is that our Russian warships have no facility for a separate toilet for women. So we said, well, that's bad enough, but that's no reason to deny entry to women. So this is the generation of people's expectations in the court, which leads to the proliferation of litigation. I say that with a sense of optimism, but that's also a great challenge and a sobering reflection for a judge, which is that, are we really capable of handling all these issues which come to us? Is that truly the function of the court? Now, one critical area which the court has to deal with when you deal with these cases is how do you distinguish between the line of policy and legality? Very often the court is criticized that you have trenched upon an area of policy, whereas your function as judges is only to decide upon legality. Now, there is no doubt about the fact that in a democratic form of government, particularly in a country like ours, we have a constitutional democracy, policy making is entrusted to the executive arm of the government, because the executive is responsible to Parliament, and therefore it is their duty to lay down policy, it is their duty to enact laws. But equally, our Constitution has a structural design where the power to interpret laws, the power to strike down a law which is not consistent with constitutional mandate, is entrusted to the judiciary and the judiciary alone.